Tommy is a good boy. My mummy always told me to be a good boy. I've tried really hard to be that, even after she died. I've never stolen anything or broken any laws. I don't stay out late unless it's for work. I don't drink or smoke. I don't go to parties. I'm 29, but I've never had a girlfriend. I've never hurt anyone. I try really hard. Sometimes it's difficult though. Like in this new job I have, there's no problem at the job, don't get me wrong. It's getting back to the apartment that is difficult. I got this new job after being fired from my last one. I was a cook at Taco Bell. Now I'm working as a security guard at a parking lot outside of the city. I gotta do the same night shift, and I come home at around 3 AM every night. It's always really dark and cold outside when I get into the train, and the train is always empty. Sometimes I sleep, but sometimes I can't. Sometimes a homeless person will wake me when I fall asleep. But now it's hard, and after a couple of months there's this girl who also takes the train with me. She isn't pretty. She has dirty blonde hair and a greasy face full of pimples, but she sometimes tries to talk to me. She always wears the same hoodies. It's either the red hoodie or the grey hoodie. She smells a little like cigarettes. I can smell it because she has got close to me a couple of times. I ignored her the first 3 times she tried talking to me, but she kept trying. I think she's lonely. I'm not lonely. Mummy said I don't need friends because they make you do things that Jesus doesn't want you to do, like smoking marijuana and things like that. She used to say good boys are good by themselves. They don't need friends or girlfriends. She said maybe someday she would help me find a good wife, but she died before that. Thing is, even though I know I shouldn't, I get lonely sometimes, and I cry. So I gave up. One day, I tapped the girl's shoulders and tried talking to her. She talks a lot, that one. Her name's Susan. I mostly just listen and said a couple of things now and then. She asked questions about me, but I didn't really answer. I don't do a lot of things. She said she worked at a retail store as a seller. I told her I was a security guard. I didn't really like the things she liked too much. She watched horror movies, but I've never seen any of those. She listened to some weird music from the 60s, but I don't really listen to music. She showed me some songs one day. One was from a band called Fleetwood Mac. I didn't really like it, but I told her I did anyway so she would like me. She smiled. One day, Susan did not come. She had given me her cell phone number, but I was too nervous to call and ask what had happened. I was sitting at the train. There was still like 15 minutes left before I reached my stop. I was looking at the window on the opposite side of the train. You could barely see anything. There were very few buildings and things between the city and the town where I lived. The window's view was pitch black. That's when Mummy showed up. Her reflection was showing on that window, flickering, waving like in the water. She looked really pale. Her eyes really dark. Her mouth was purple, and she had barely any hair left in her head, which made her look even older than she already was. She did not say anything. Sometimes she wasn't even there, but every time she showed up, she would stare at me. The next day I asked Susan why she hadn't come. She told me she had the flu and that she did not want to come today either, but her boss told her she had to. She sneezed and I gave her a little towel I had in my pocket. She thanked me and looked at me strange. She moved her hand to my pants and opened the zipper. She touched my wiener and did something that I don't know what it is, but it felt really good. I liked it very much, but I looked at the same window from the day before and saw that Mummy's image was watching the whole time. She did not look happy. The next day Susan didn't come again. She sent me a text message telling me that her flu had gotten worse. I was riding the train by myself again when Mummy's reflection began to talk to me from the glass of the window. "You haven't been a good boy, Tommy," she said. "Why, Mummy?" I asked. "You have let that girl lead you astray, Tommy. You are no longer pure. You are no longer innocent. Like Adam, you tasted the fruit of the forbidden tree, and Eve made you do it." I began to cry. "Forgive me, Mummy, forgive me. I did not know. I don't want to be bad. I want to be a good boy." Then there were 2 dots of glowing red light in her eyes. "You can be good again, Tommy." The next night I did what Mummy said. I invited Susan to my apartment and stabbed her in the face, the neck, the stomach, and so many other places. She tried to scream, but Mummy helped. This time it wasn't just Mummy's reflection, she was actually there with me, wearing a beautiful black dress, and she held Susan's mouth shut. After we were done, there was blood all over, and Susan looked even uglier. Still, I liked her like that. I'm not alone anymore. I have Mummy and Susan living with me now. I asked Mummy if Susan could stay. Her red eyes glowed, and she said Susan could, that she would allow it, because I'm a good boy. I've seen the creature that lived in the kitchen. Hello, my name is James. Here's a bit about me. I'm 24 and live with my girlfriend in Hurricane, Utah. Although we don't have very good paying jobs, we enjoy living here. As you can probably tell though, what I'm about to share with you happened about 9 years ago, the day before Christmas. My parents had left me home alone while they went out for late Christmas shopping. I think I was going to invite friends over, despite my parents telling me not to. But the more I thought about it, it wasn't so appealing. Most of my friends were at a relative's place to spend Christmas with them, but I didn't have much family, and even if I did, I wouldn't want to leave the house. Anyways, my parents told me to call them if anything had happened. Now before I continue, I will say we lived in a pretty safe neighbourhood. There was rarely ever an incident, and everything was usually peaceful. So I was thinking about going to my computer, finish playing through a game me and my friends liked. Before I could get to my computer though, I heard a faint scratching sound come from our kitchen. This wasn't too strange because where we lived there also happened to be a lot of rats around, so I just sat down and put my headphones on. Looking back, I can see now that at this point I was completely naive to my surroundings. If anybody wanted to, they could easily grab me, or more violently, stab me. Being only 15, I shrugged it off and went back to my game. Even though I heard the footsteps and the door opening from outside my bedroom, I never took my headphones off. It's just the game, I would be silently reassuring myself. The noise slowly grew closer and closer, and finally, out of paranoia, I quickly turned around. Nothing. I sighed a sigh of relief and went back to playing my game. About an hour later, I heard a knock at the door. I stood up and went to it, hoping my parents weren't home yet. And when I opened it, nobody was there, except for a lone letter sitting on the front porch. It read, "Run, run, I see you can't though, and that's no fun." I dropped it. I didn't care about what it said. I thought it was the boys next door pranking me again. Before I could sit back down, however, I noticed his computer was completely unplugged, and when I turned around to see what the problem was, I saw it. I didn't know what I was looking at. Its teeth were rotting and its face was distorted, and it looked like somebody had burnt it. It walked on all fours, and it stared at me with its blank smile. Half of its mouth was covered with rotting flesh, and I quickly looked for something to defend myself. Finding nothing, I hastily ran upstairs, closing my bedroom door. I called the police and slowly went out my window. I decided to stay at my friend's house for the night, feeling it would be much safer. In the morning I had to explain to the police what had happened, but since I didn't want to sound crazy, I just told them an intruder broke into my house. I won't forget that night anytime soon, and remember, always lock the door. I have seen the creature living in my kitchen. Good night. Super 8. The chilling cold of the cheap hotel room, put together with a poignant smell of cigarettes, would not let me sleep. Besides, the paper-thin walls could not conceal the faint noises of some white trash couple fucking next door. After all, this was a roadside motel in the middle of nowhere in Ohio. I knew I had to rest soon. It was midnight already. Not that the broken alarm clock next to my bed would let me know that. While I looked at the ceiling, trying to fall asleep, there was a subtle creak at the bathroom's door. Opened ever so slightly. The light which I had left on shone upon my bed. It actually gave me some comfort. The spell ended too soon. Suddenly the room's telephone rang. "Hello," I said. Nothing but static. I put it down, then returned to my bed. It immediately rang again, and once more, nothing but static noise. It seemed to wait for me, to return to bed, to resume ringing. It annoyed me. I waited to see if it would stop, and about half a minute it did. A brief moment later it rang again. I picked it up one last time. Who is this? Do you have any idea of what time it is? Only static. Hello? But that static did not seem willing to elaborate any further. I listened, trying to make sense of anything. Maybe the telephone was just really shitty and old, and the words were being muffled under the noise. That was when I heard it. It was almost indistinguishable, but it was there, the voice of a man, softly humming what seemed to be a lullaby. The voice felt like it was too deep to be human. After I noticed it, I could not notice anymore. I put the phone down and let it off the hook. As I tried to sleep again, I heard it. I guess my brain was looking for it. And as I said before, when you notice it, you could not notice anymore. I heard the humming. It came from the bathroom. I was about to stand up when the bathroom lights turned off on their own. In that complete darkness, the hummed lullaby became louder. "Who's there?" I shouted with a trembling voice. Every muscle of my body contracted, my eyes wide. The answer was whispered into my ear. The thing's breath tickled my skin. "I just want to help you sleep." Run, man, run. I love walking through fog after a warm summer rain. Granted, not digging it this particular night, sort of messing with my eyes when playing off this artificial orange glow from the lamplights, illuminating the way down this broken up city street. Had to be Central Ohio. I believe I made it to the west side of, was it Columbus or Cincinnati? Always got those two mixed up on maps. Especially this was the first time I was actually physically travelling through the state. Could be neither for all I know. Even with strained eyes, was pretty much on auto drive as I keep up with the pace down the cracked concrete path. Wasn't hard losing myself in thoughts, and only taking the time to occasionally check my phone's GPS for guidance as I went. And my current thoughts consisted of being a little hungry, probably needing to find a hotel for the night to dry out a bit, and that my backpack needed restocking so I could feed that hunger. Figure I'm too far out west. Should have done these things when I was in the centre of town, not in what seemed to be either a rundown part of the city or abandoned altogether in this general strip of it. No open stores, no lights in windows, only the electric glow illuminating the way forward. I mean, where there was the orange glow, since the occasional lamplight down the way was burnt out. I sigh inwardly, trucking on. Okay, maybe I can refuel in the burbs or even in the next town, though it's been a good part of the day since my last rest. Still feel like I have a few more hours in me if I push it a bit. My pacing is good, I'm making good time, and hey, this is the point of these little backpack road trips I tend to take. To clear my head, get some much needed fresh air, and explore this country from head to toe. I mean, I have the money, I have the time, I have this opportunity, the luxury that most don't, and small inconveniences like this are whatever in the grand scheme of things. But man, it was quiet, admittedly eerily so for somewhere in a fairly urban area. The fog muffling everything down to my footsteps, hailing from Chicago. I tend to notice the absence of city ambience, even on the quietest of streets. A faraway car zooming by, a TV or radio playing somewhere, someone talking on their phone, a group of somebodies being loud outside of them, some business a few blocks over, things. But nothing now, not on this street, probably not in this neighbourhood, just dilapidated buildings and the slight muffling of segmented concrete, being occasionally crunched beneath my boots. It takes me a little off guard when I hear a faint something from my right. I hear what sounds like a whisper, harsh like somebody trying to be heard, yet soft enough to be too far away to be heard properly. And I instinctively shrug the backpack a bit more squarely onto my shoulders as I noted the possibility of not being alone. Wouldn't normally be an issue, I'm a big guy. Well, well into my 30s and more than fit for my prime, but alone in an unfamiliar town and in such a rundown area. Another harsh whisper, this time from the left and about as far as the one I'd heard earlier. My left ear is a little sharper than my other, and this time it catches what's said. Run. Okay, this was something new. I mean, I didn't run, of course, but I do look more intently at the darkened abandoned buildings flanking my sides and catch a blur of pale orange through one of the windows. Was that somebody's hat or a helmet? What the... Run. Behind me to my right, and my head instinctively turns in the direction to catch a flash of dark grey at head height like the first, flitting past another broken window, and I grin to myself, nodding and keeping on my way, thinking it's most likely punk-ass kids fucking around, running from their friends or maybe from incoming authorities. Run, man, run. Not whispered this time, but quietly spoken to my left again, as I come up on an intersection illuminated by a streetlight, was what had to have been the first pale orange blur I'd seen, and I think, was that which escapes me as an abrupt bark of laughter. I mean, I don't mean to, but it's how my mind reacts when I see a guy with a skull painted on his face like it's Halloween. A big guy, granted bigger than me, but come on. It's too late for any of that, dude. I let a little of my homegrown Chicago accent inflect on my words for emphasis. I mean, given the situation of a possible 2-on-1, probably should have just kept my mouth shut. But no way in hell a kid with a grease paint on his face like some apocalyptic B-movie juggalo was gonna punk me out. You and your friends should probably go home. Run. That was ahead of the right, from a burnt-out apartment building. I can make out another guy, like the guy in the street now, behind me, as I approached the building, all decked out in black save the white face paint glowing, a pale shade of orange from electric lamplight. Okay, this was a little surreal, and my brain started to whir a bit to catch up to the impending situation. Run, man, run. Another pale streak in another busted out window, the opposite of the way I was walking. Did these guys burst out every window in the area to pull this horror movie crap off? It would have made me give a nod of strained acknowledgement to the craft with how impressive all of this, whatever it was, tallying the count of possible pursuers in my head. 6? 7? Pivoting as I walk, I see 4 guys keeping pace behind me, 3 roughly marching shoulder to shoulder while one looms in front of them. The darker grey blur I'd caught sight of earlier. Should be Running Man. This guy, I'm guessing, he's the leader, done some unimpressive makeup, which I found probably the most amusing, even in such a direly growing situation. A wolfman. He was made up to look like a textbook movie werewolf. Gotta give it to all of them, creeps or not. These guys were going all out. What's all this about? I casually ask in my inadvertently thickening accent as I continue to walk backwards. The killer clown thing gets stale. My head was starting to roar with blood as I saw a 5th join the rank of skulls in the back, and then the 6th and 7th. That got me to turn around, and while not particularly running, I do humour them with turning my walk into a brisk jog. And they start after me, seemingly in unison, as their combined footfalls seem to cut through the fog in slightly muffled waves of thumps. The blood pumping in my ears gets me to focus on my breathing as I assess the situation. 7-on-1, and they're most likely either crazy, don't give a fuck, or simply want to recreate a scene from The Karate Kid, if it were rated R. So there's more than a little potential trouble here. I pull out my phone and hit the emergency call button. The operator answers as I make out the quick heavy footfalls and don't turn in time to avoid the sharp pain as something connects with my ear, sending the phone skittering in pieces across the damp pavement. I swerve with the impact as the wolfman passes me, my eye catching the glint of knuckle dusters in the lamplight. This gets me to stop as he continues to jog on a bit, then does his cocky, flourishing about face to turn his impressively crafted wolfish grin on me. Nuh-uh, none of that, man. My mind remarkably realises that the wolfman has a slight lisp due to him having fangs. My eyes catch more glints of orange lights as I was slowly surrounded by the schoolmen, their metal ring knuckles being purposefully turned to catch the lamp and shine in my eyes. They wanted me to know what I was in for. And the blood roaring in my ears starts to subside as I feel my jeans tighten, and every last one of them pause as they see this happen. I never understand why that, for me, it always starts with my legs. One of the skulls, a big guy, is the first to come at me, and I catch him square in the chest with my prominent, thickening 2 knuckles. And well, with my muscle mass having doubled within the last second, my fist easily caves his sternum in, folding him vertically in half, making him inadvertently clap in front of my face, as if to give me applause for impeccable execution. He drops with a thud crack as the back of his head smacks the pavement, and there's the absolute fog-induced silence again, as we all are still. Well, save my growling, but right now I can't help that. Also, can't help my grinning, which is considerably more wolfish than their leader could ever hope to pull off. I drop my bag and bunt it into the nearby weed-infested lawn, as they then see it's my turn to blur. There's a thunk and a warm spray as my thickened claws catch a pivoting skullman by the shoulder, tearing it clear off. I passively learn that the bodysuits they were wearing was thick leather, and that not all of the skullmen were, well, men. I take her up fast, removing her head from shoulders in a clean, low, arching swipe from where she withered on the ground. Continuing mid-stride to another, my boot catching him in the knee and snapping the leg inward and backhand him under the chin, snapping his neck. Shit, probably shattering his spine. One actually tried to swing, not realising that now, no matter how fast they think they are, it's all slow motion to me when I'm like this. His black knuckles whiffing where my head was and catching claws to the throat. I saw that the skulls now that were left decided to book it, and the smallest of them catches the body of one I've just killed as I flung it in full force, going by the surprise squeal as the much huger torso folding them in half as it connects with their spine. It might have been a kid, maybe a younger brother or sister, or a son or a daughter, but definitely dead as their head slams into the ground face first, teeth skittering along the concrete, not unlike the pieces of my dearly departed phone earlier. My voice isn't much deeper, even in this state. I'll never be a baritone, and the other 2 skulls are far gone. I mean, I can catch them, but I want them to try and explain this mess to the police, or tell it to their Halloween hood rat friends, or whatever they'll end up doing. But man, does my voice carry, and I only want one specific guy to hear it. Should have let me call the cops, would have saved me a trip to the mall the next town up for a new jacket. My hulking form slowly towered over the petrified guy in the werewolf get-up, his eyes bugging out, letting me just now notice the yellow contacts, mouth comically wide open with his designer fangs exposed. Cupping his jaw in my huge palms and bringing my elongated muzzle to his painted nose, my eyes trained on his, I do try to make my face as sympathetic as possible. Raising my brows, making my eyes big, grinning a bit, but I feel him shake. I smell the piss now coursing down his leather-clad legs, and I mean, I do feel a little sorry for the guy, I do. Oh nah, come on man, hey. Trying to watch my strength, I slap his fake furred cheek slightly, until his eyes seem to focus a little bit. Letting go of his face, I back off a little, pacing my arms on my knees in a slight squat, keeping my eyes trained on his and playing up my Chicago dialect to a comedic degree, or trying to keep a light expression on my admittedly monstrous lupine face. I hope to break his stupor as I whisper, "Run, Wolfman, run." He takes an unsure step back, another, and then another, trying to pivot at the same time, and instead landing on his hands and knees. I wait till he stumbles up, his arms pinwheeling a bit as he starts to wail down the long, abandoned street littered with more than a few of his dead colleagues, and I earnestly give him to the count of 3, before, in a flash, my claws tear into his back, along the spine as I rip in, and then parting his body into halves. Even if it's an instant death for the guy, there's still the consideration that it takes about a couple of minutes for the intact brain to shut down as I tell the half of the body that still has the head that he probably should have run faster. I sigh, looking past all the body parts and shredded clothing at my shattered phone, focusing my lupine ears out, hear no sirens on the wind, and I shift back, my slightly oversized clothing stretched only slightly, but caked in clumps of blood and matter. That earns another sigh as I try my best to wipe off my hands and arms on my ruined bomber jacket and change into a fresh set of clothing from my pack. I toss my soiled clothing and the phone into it, hoping I can get to the laundromat or dumpster far enough away to not raise questions, but knowing better, I'm planning on booking an out-of-state line within the next hour. God damn it, now I'm probably going to be starving for a while after this mess. And contrary to popular belief, we don't eat people. I mean, we're part people, right? Puts the man in Wolfman. I may be a monster on occasion, but I'm no freaking cannibal.